he can get there. And I believe that's exactly what will happen today.
Crazy Eights, led by Gates, the former speaker clearly has more time on his hands than he used to. Joining us now is CNN congressional correspondent Lauren Fox, live outside Congressman Jordan's office this morning. What's the game plan here? What are you hearing behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, look, today Jordan goes to the floor at 11 a.m. to try and pick up a couple of votes on the floor of the House of Representatives. But there's a real chance, Phil, that he could start to lose some of that support on the floor. There are a number of members we are watching who potentially may have voted for Jordan on the first round, but may not stick with him on a second or third ballot. If he starts to hemorrhage support, then you get into a situation where there are a number of active discussions happening right now among Republicans about bringing a resolution to the floor of the House as soon as today that would potentially empower McHenry to continue being the Speaker pro tem, but with additional power so that he could bring legislation to the floor. There is really a breaking point happening within the Republican conference right now as a number of members are looking around, seeing the reality, seeing that there is likely no one in their conference at this moment who could get the 217 votes needed to be the next speaker. In that case, you have a lot of Republicans who want to govern in this moment of crisis. It has been more than 2 weeks without a speaker. It has been more than 10 days since an attack in Israel, and you are potentially staring down a government shutdown in less than a month at this point. Those Republicans believe that it is a moment where McHenry needs to be empowered so he can start bringing legislation to the floor. If they introduce a resolution today, they have 2 legislative days to act on it. That means that there could be active discussions with Democrats because in all likelihood, they are going to need Democratic support to get that effort across the finish line because there are a number of Republicans who are not going to support empowering McHenry. They want Jim Jordan to be the next speaker. They want that to be the focus at this moment. But obviously, Phil, we are in a situation where it's basically Groundhog's Day. Every single day, it is not clear who the Republican is who could lead this conference with such a narrow majority in this moment.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It had been on the periphery, that idea of empowering Speaker pro tem Patrick McHenry, now very clearly moving toward the mainstream. Lauren Fox, thank you.
All right, joining us now, Republican Congressman from New York, Nick LaLauda. He is one of 20 Republicans who voted against Jim Jordan's bid to become Speaker yesterday. Congressman, it's great to have you. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
It's interesting. Jim Jordan said yesterday to Lawrence reporting, no one in our conference wants to see any type of coalition government with Democrats. What do you say? Would you be supportive, vote for a resolution that would empower the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry? Try to keep the government open, let's say?
Well, I think the Speaker pro tem, and some people get a little confused by that term because there's some Latin in there, is merely the temporary Speaker. And when there's a vacancy in the office of Speaker, I think the Speaker pro tem not only can act, he or she should act, much like the way a Vice President can or should act in a vacancy in the office of President. There should be a continuity of government. This position, the Speaker pro tempore, was contemplated post 9/11 specifically for the continuity of government. Business should go on in the House of Representatives in spite of there being a bona fide Speaker, and we should accept the fact, and it does not require a vote in my opinion. The Speaker pro tem has every right, duty, and responsibility and authority to act in the absence of a bona fide Speaker. I would encourage that he do so right away.
Full capacity as a Vice President would in the analogy you're giving?
One more time on that, please.
Just with full capacity of the Speaker, with the full abilities of a Speaker as a Vice President would in the analogy you just gave?
Yeah, absolutely. Has every duty, right, and responsibility of a bona fide Speaker. This is not a position merely to be a caretaker of the election of the next Speaker. We have a clerk of the House of Representatives that can do that administrative function. This position was contemplated post 9/11 when our country was under attack and we contemplated losing multiple elected officials at the highest level. Of course, logic would dictate and would not need to have gone to law school to come to this conclusion that the Speaker pro tem absolutely has every right, duty, and responsibility and authority to act in the absence of a bona fide Speaker.
Congressman, I think the rub here, the tension here is that Patrick McHenry, who is the Speaker pro tem, does have people that have gone to law school that disagree with your interpretation. I'm not saying who's right one way or the other. And which brings the question, if he disagrees, would you support this resolution from a Congressman Dave Joyce to give him those powers you say he should have already?
Well, that's tricky because, everything is based upon legal precedents in this town, and specifically with roles that we have in the House. And if we facilitate a vote, we're affirming the failed notion that it requires a vote to act. So I think that one should really seek some more legal guidance on this, and a vote probably taints the very notion that the Speaker has every single power assigned to the Speaker Pro Tem has every single power assigned to the Speaker.
Another way to look at it is that a vote in the affirmative would set some precedent for this. What would it take to get you to a yes on Jordan?
Well, I've been speaking with Representative Jordan over the last couple of weeks since he became a candidate for Speaker, and I've announced my criteria quite clearly. I'm looking for a reasonable Republican, a common sense conservative to lead the House of Representatives. And specifically in the 118th Congress, we understand that just several weeks from now, the government runs out of money. I was one of the Republicans who supported funding the government to ensure that our troops got paid. We should not play games with soldier pay. And I've asked every single candidate for Speaker who's approached me in the last couple of weeks, will you ensure the government gets funded? And that has been my number one criteria. Yes, we should pursue the commitment to America. Yes, we should continue to reduce spending. But we must keep the government open while we do so. We must show the troops that we will put them first. And I've asked that criteria of all of our candidates, including Representative Jordan, and I've not yet been satisfied by his answer.
What happens next? And I think the reason I asked that question, and I know everybody's asking the question right now, but in talking to people inside your conference, it actually feels like the opposition to Jordan may start growing as soon as the second vote. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think that's likely. I think it's more likely that there are less Jordan votes on round 2 than in round 1, especially if he doesn't address things like how to fund the government. That's a big issue for a number of us who are a no right now. If there is no specific resolution on that, and we're not looking for promises, we are looking for bona fide actions, statements which make it very clear that we're not going to play games with soldier pay moving forward. Yes, we should negotiate with the administration, who is weak on the border, who is spending a whole bunch of our future generations' tax dollars. We should negotiate from a position of strength, but to use soldier pay as a bargaining chip is a red line for me.
I thought it was interesting that your fellow Republican, who also didn't vote for Jim Jordan, Carlos Jimenez of Florida, voted for McCarthy instead, by the way, said, "I'm not going to be part of a coup." Do you see it as a coup?
Yeah, this is a political coup. 8 Republicans joined with 210 Democrats to remove a speaker who was making a lot of progress for our nation, who at times stepped across the aisle, and when we raised the debt ceiling, when we funded the government, was doing the right things to fulfill our commitment to America, to make life better for my constituents, obviously for Carlos's constituents as well, and to throw out somebody who was making that progress was a political coup that needs to be addressed. We should reform the motion to vacate rule. One should not be able to merely vacate the speaker. One should have to come with a bona fide alternative to do so, or else we're going to end in this chaos every time. It took McCarthy years to build relationships and to gain confidence and trust to get elected by his peers. And to think that somebody's going to be able to do it just in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks is unreasonable. Those folks who voted to vacate the chair knew this chaos would ensue. They're responsible for it, and we need to find a way to move on. And perhaps the best way to do so is to have a Speaker Pro Tem run the House and to do the people's business and to get that started right away.
Congressman Nick LaLota of New York, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
And you're looking at live pictures of President Biden. What he's doing right now is he's meeting with families and first responders to the horrific Hamas attacks on Israel. He's set to speak live at any moment. Our Wolf Blitzer is here next.
Confused by the Medicare ABCs? If you have Medicare, then you probably have Parts A and B. But did you know switching to a Medicare Part C plan, also known as Medicare Advantage, might save you money and is one of the best ways to help protect yourself from unlimited out-of-pocket Medicare costs? The Medicare annual enrollment period is the perfect time to call for a free Medicare benefits review. If you only have Medicare Parts A and B, you may be paying too much in out-of-pocket costs and missing out on valuable benefits. Medicare Advantage plans may be available in your zip code with additional benefits and savings. compared to your current coverage. The Medicare Benefit Helpline is accepting calls right now to see what plans with additional benefits are available to you. If you already have a plan, call to find out if any changes have been made to your coverage for 2024. Time is limited. Call before the Medicare annual enrollment deadline to get your plan. You don't get a Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits automatically. You need to take action. Call for your free Medicare benefits review. Find out what additional benefits are available to you with a Medicare Advantage plan. If you only have Medicare Parts A and B, you may be paying too much in out-of-pocket costs and not receiving valuable benefits. Call to see if you're eligible for a Medicare Advantage plan today. Everyone on Medicare should call to make sure you're getting a plan with the benefits you want. Call the Medicare Benefit Helpline for your free, no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Plans may offer more benefits and savings than you are receiving with your current plan. You don't get a Medicare Advantage plan with extra benefits automatically. You need to take action. Call now during the Medicare annual enrollment period for your free Medicare benefits review.
Call 800-594-9400. That's 800-594-9400. 800-594-9400. Call now.
We're showing you live pictures right now of Beirut, Lebanon, outside the U.S. Embassy. We have seen protests over the course of the last 12 or 13 hours in the wake of that explosion at a hospital in Gaza, and it appears to be escalating. At the same exact moment, President Biden is in Tel Aviv right now, meeting with the families of those taken hostage, of those victims from the terror attack conducted by Hamas on October 7th, which has driven to this point the president meeting behind the scenes with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as his war cabinet, now meeting with these families. Is expected to speak publicly in short order. Joining us now is CNN anchor of the Situation Room, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, the last 24 hours in a very unsettled situation, it's accelerated tenfold, probably more. What can the president say today that could change the dynamic?
Well, he's going to continue to express his solid support for Israel. There's no doubt about that. There are serious problems, though, as a result of this the hospital being blown up in Gaza. Serious problems with other friendly countries in the region. I've covered the Middle East for a long time. U.S. relations with Israel, U.S. relations with Arab countries, and that leaders of the Palestinian Authority, Jordan, and Egypt were all supposed to meet with the President of the United States in Amman, Jordan. The fact that they decided, because of this hospital explosion, to cancel that visit, not meet with him, it's pretty extraordinary that the President of the United States would come all the way to the Middle East. And three entities, the Palestinian Authority, Jordan, and Egypt. Jordan and Egypt receive billions of dollars in U.S. economic and military assistance every year. The fact that their leadership would decide, this is not a good time to meet with a visiting president who doesn't, normal American presidents don't normally go to a war zone. And in this particular case, that this president decided to go. The fact that they decided to cancel and not let him come to Amman, Jordan, to meet with him in person. They'll do a phone conversation, but that's clearly not the same.
Yeah, and Krishan was saying earlier on the program, really unprecedented to have them cancel on him. So we see right now live pictures of President Biden leading into one of the things he does best as consoler-in-chief. He can do this, he will make live remarks, but he will leave without those crucial meetings and potentially without any guarantee on getting humanitarian aid in, nor any clarity on what the end game is for Israel in Gaza.
Yeah, that humanitarian aid, it was so significant that he was going to meet with President El-Sisi of Egypt, which controls that whole southern part of Gaza, the exit, the border crossing, because he really wanted to try to convince President El-Sisi to open up that Rafah border crossing and allow much more humanitarian assistance into Gaza. And the fact that they're not going to have a face-to-face meeting, I think, undermines that possibility.
Well, if you've done so much work in the region, you were referencing some of it. Have you ever seen it at this level?
Well, I remember the 1967 Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War. There was the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the Six-Day War in 67. I was much younger, obviously. I wasn't a reporter at that time. But, there were wars between Israel and Egypt and Syria and Jordan in that particular case, 67 Six-Day War, and then 73 Yom Kippur War. There were a lot of people that were killed. Those were major wars. This is a war with a terrorist organization named Hamas and Islamic Jihad which is also in Gaza right now, and it's a lot different than a full-scale military-to-military state wars that Israel has had in the past.
And just to tell people what they're watching on the other, next to Wolf right now is President Biden standing next to Tony Blinken, as Secretary of State. We're going to listen for a minute.
People coming together in community and national service, and Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, the folks that we have gathered with us here today are representative of all of that and representative of the unity and the resilience of the Israeli people and the light that is shining through this incredible darkness. Mr. Secretary.
I've had the opportunity to meet so many Israelis over the last few days that I've been in and out of Israel. I've heard the stories. I've heard about the lives lost and changed forever. We know that virtually every Israeli has been touched by the bloody hand of Hamas. But what I found is a nation that's united, yes, in grief, but also united in resolve. And we know the pride that Israel takes in the ability to defend itself by itself, but as we want to make very clear, you don't have to do that because we're here. We're here too, to make sure that you're able to defend yourselves and to deal with something that is, I think, on a basic human level, almost unimaginable. So hard for any of us to process or understand, but it's been so important to meet and talk to so many of you because that's what makes it real. And no one understands that better, no one feels that more than the President of the United States, Mr. President.
Folks, there's an Irish poet named William Yeats, and he wrote a line. He said, "Too long of suffering makes a stone of the heart. Too long of suffering makes a stone of the heart." The thing that I found in just this real quick meeting with all of you is none of your hearts have turned to stone yet. Every one of you talked about what you have to do. Every one of you talked about having to reach out. Talked about whether or not they're a Jew or a Muslim, reach out. And, I've often said, I remember the first time that I was in Israel with Golda Meir. She was just before the 6-Day War. And she was telling me how terrible everything was, which it was. She kept flipping the maps up and down behind her, and all of a sudden she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" And I thought, that's unusual. Because she just got up and walked out that door outside her office. And we're standing there having a photograph taken like you and I are standing looking at the press. And she, without looking at me, she turned, she like this, she said, "You look worried, Senator." I said, "I am." She said, "Don't worry, we Jews have a secret weapon in our fight. We have no place else to go." Well, the truth of the matter is, if there weren't in Israel, we'd have to invent one. The truth of the matter is that I believe that, as I went home and said, I got in trouble at the time, but it's true. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. And I think the security and safety of Jews worldwide is anchored in the continued vibrance of the state of Israel. That's what I think it's about at its core. And so I've admired you all in this country for so long. And I'm convinced that the more people know your responses to what's happening, as opposed to just what war and peace is about, the more they're going to be inclined to embrace Israel. And, but a lot more to say, but I'd like to talk to you private if I can.
Wish he had spoken a little louder.
you are looking at live pictures of President Biden in Israel, in Tel Aviv, standing next to and speaking with the world and the families who have had some of their family members kidnapped by Hamas and some of their family members killed in that horrific attack on last Saturday, October 7th. He is here to speak with the Israeli leadership. He is here to also try and have conversations to try and figure out a humanitarian corridor for those who are in Gaza suffering from the airstrikes and the dire consequences of the Israeli blockade there, where they don't have enough water, food, or fuel. I want to go now to our Caitlin Collins, who is also in country here watching all of this unfold. Give us some sense of just how important and significant this.
Too long of suffering makes stone of your heart, but none of your hearts have yet turned to stone. Too long of suffering makes you stone of the heart, but none of you yet have had your hearts turned to stone. Despite everything that's been thrown.
And the stop that President Biden just made is easily the most somber of the few stops that he is making while he's here on the ground in Israel for a very short, just really a daytime visit today. He started out by meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister, then he expanded that and opened it up to that newly formed wartime cabinet that Prime Minister Netanyahu has formed. That's who he was meeting with for an extended period of time. But there in the room with him, those people that you saw surrounding him, those were first responders who responded on that deadly day on October 7th as that Hamas attack unfolded here in Israel. It was the families of victims who were killed that day, and also the relatives of hostages who still don't know the fate of their loved ones, which is something that the White House said was on President Biden's priority list, because of course we know those hostages include several Americans as well. And right there at the end, you saw the president being asked a question by a reporter. You couldn't exactly make out what his answer was. Our colleague Kevin Liptak is in the room. We'll wait to see what it was exactly that President Biden said. But of course, one of the things that he is being asked about while he's here, Sarah, is what he said when he first got here, which is about that hospital explosion that happened in Gaza City that caused so much uproar, something that you heard Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the world should be outraged about, but it shouldn't be directed at the Israelis because they are denying responsibility. And that is a denial that I should note President Biden has emphasized since he's been here on the ground, saying based on what he's seen, he believed it was, quote, the other team was the phrase that he used. He didn't directly say that it was Palestinian militants, but it was Palestinian terrorists that I should note the IDF blamed earlier. And so that is something, of course, that has been a central undertone of this entire visit since that happened. Who is responsible for that? Of course, given that is what scrapped the other part of this trip that was supposed to happen that is now no longer happening. I should note President Biden is going to come in this room here behind me soon after he meets these first responders and these victims, the families' victims of the families, and come out and make remarks. We'll see what he says, if there's any update on humanitarian progress. Of course, a corridor somewhere for civilians in Gaza who are fleeing to go, getting water and food, and all of those are key issues that he's been discussing while he's been here on the ground today, Sarah.
Too long of suffering makes the stone of your heart. Too long of suffering makes you stone of the heart. But none of your hearts here in Israel looks like they've completely turned to stone yet. You can still love and wish well to others, no matter their race or religious persuasion. You still have an open heart that can love and see the divine oneness in everybody. Too long of suffering makes you stone of the heart. Too long of suffering makes you stone of the heart.
Dismembered body parts, charred corpses.
None of your hearts have turned
Still not a clear
to
picture
stone
on
yet.
exactly how many people were killed. Certainly, it seems to be in the hundreds. We have spoken also to the Organizers of that Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, they say that hundreds of people were using the hospital as a shelter, if you like, because there had been this order to evacuate northern Gaza to move further south because there had been pretty consistent, well, certainly relentless bombardment in Gaza and northern Gaza particularly. A lot of people in these situations, as you know, Sarah, they take refuge in hotels, they take refuge in hospitals, places that they think are relatively safe, and it appears that most of the victims were ordinary people who were just taking refuge, as well as patients at the hospital. More broadly speaking, the hospital is...
That was a song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world.
We have heard from doctors who say that they're being forced to perform operations without anesthesia. There is no electricity. There is no drinking water. Our own journalist on the ground has talked about having to boil water from the toilet so that people have something to drink. The UN has called this an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe unfolding before our eyes. The UN Secretary General has called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. But of course, what happened at the hospital has really complicated efforts. President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken had really hoped that they were going to be able to announce some sort of a tangible deliverable here in terms of opening up humanitarian aid to allow it to at least, if not to allow people to flee Gaza, at least to allow aid in to the people of Gaza. That now becomes incredibly complex prospect, Sarah, because Arab leaders have canceled their meeting with President Biden, because they are now dealing with outrage and protests on the streets of their cities. It becomes all that more difficult for diplomats to do their job, for humanitarian organizations to have their voices heard, and for some modicum of respite to be delivered to the people of Gaza, Sarah.
Yeah, it is really important to remember that no matter all of the noise out there from many different sides of this conflict, that there are hundreds of families dealing with loss, dealing with injured, and just terror inside of Gaza because it is so densely populated. I know you and I have both been on the ground there multiple times. It is a very difficult place before there's any kind of incursion, and now it has been rendered just a complete disaster when it comes to the humanitarian effort there. Clarissa Ward, thank you so much for your reporting. Caitlin Collins, I appreciate you, and we'll check back in with you both when we get some new information as Biden makes his way to where you are, Caitlin. John, Kate?
We will get back to you soon, Sarah. Thank you. So this morning, the Israeli military is steadfast and adamant that Islamic Jihad in Gaza is behind the deadly blast at the hospital, presenting evidence at a press conference overnight. Watch this.
By land, sea, or air that hit the hospital. Second, our radar system tracked rockets fired by terrorists from within Gaza at the time of the explosion. Third, we have intelligence, some that will be shared here, of communication between terrorists talking about rockets misfiring.
He just talked about some audio, which hopefully we'll play for people in a little bit of a conversation Israel says was between Hamas just after the strike. With us now, CNN military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hurley. General, thank you. This is the location of the hospital in Gaza right now, just so people get a sense of what it looked like before. This is the overall campus, and as I said, the IDF released what they call evidence that this was caused by Islamic Jihad, what the U.S. calls a terror group operating inside Gaza. And one of the pieces of evidence that they provided was this radar trajectory of rockets they say launched from Gaza. Explain what we're seeing here.
What we're seeing is the lines of several rockets coming from a launcher. This is called a point of origin in military speak.
They normally go to a point of impact, and this is what the Iron Dome uses to intercept rockets. They see where they're going, and then they intercept them if they're going into a populated area. But what happens, John, a lot of time with some of these rockets, because they're not real technologically advanced, they will just fall out of the sky. And what I mean by that is the engine will stop. And as soon as they do that, a rocket has the trajectory of a brick. So it immediately goes a little bit further and then just drops down. But an important factor to consider, when that happens, it still has rocket fuel inside the rocket. So it not only has the explosive warhead, it has fuel behind it. What happened, the indicators are, or what the Israelis are saying, is one of those rockets came out, lost its engine, lost its forward propulsion, and just dropped out of the sky, and it dropped near this Ali hospital, which is on the southwest side of the city of Gaza.
Stand by 1 second, Jeff.
Stand by for us real quick. We're going to get back to Caitlin Collins. She's got some new reporting and some new information about President Biden and what he is learning about, well, exactly what we're talking about, this blast at the hospital. Caitlin, what are you picking up?
Yeah, John and Kate, this is really notable because when President Biden arrived here in Israel, that was when he first said that he embraced those denials by Israel, that they were not behind that hospital explosion in Gaza. And he said based on what he had seen, but he did not say what it was that he had seen. But when he was just in the room meeting with those families and the first responders, he was asked what made him confident that Israel was not, in fact, behind that strike. And I'm quoting the president now. He says, "The data I was shown by my Defense Department." So he is citing the Pentagon, saying that is the reason he is confident that it was not the Israel Defense Forces that were behind that explosion that happened at that hospital, something that they have strenuously denied. He says it is the Pentagon who is backing that up, and that is why he cited that as soon as he arrived here on the ground in Tel Aviv. Obviously, that is incredibly significant because we've seen the protests that have been spreading because of those claims that it was Israel behind it. The president says the Pentagon has shown him that it was not Israel that was behind that explosion that hit that hospital in Gaza City.
Great and important context and background on this. Caitlin, thanks so much. And General, you're here with us. Not just information coming from the IDF. President Biden saying it's information he received. Data from the Pentagon, from the Defense Department, says what to you?
Well, it tells me that there's more information, and you're just not going to take another government's word for something happening, even though the pictures that the Israeli Defense Forces gave out are pretty compelling. But we're always going to confirm or deny within the Defense Department. And I said this earlier today, that there has to be more to this. And I think the U.S. government has what we call MASENT, intelligence from satellites, from signals that show launches. We have that capability. So as much as you're going to get a tactical approach to this point of origin, point of aim, which is pretty significant, you're going to have an overhead platform that sees a missile burn when it takes off or when something explodes and comes out of the sky.
All right,
so it reinforces.
Let's talk a little bit more about the evidence the IDF did present. And again, people looking for absolute slam dunk proof one way or the other aren't going to see it here, but the IDF points to craters. This is the site of the explosion. Right. Explain.
Yeah, well, okay, this is the hospital here. This is a parking lot with a lot of cars in it, and you see pictures of it. The explosion site, which potentially the fuel that we were talking about earlier, burned most but not all of the cars in that parking lot, which is interesting. It talks about fuel spilling all over. But on the side of the hospital, I also saw some pockmarks, which would be the results of an explosion.
See some of it here, General, as this goes through. This is some of the aftermath from the VO, and you'll see.
This is the middle of the parking lot, but as it spans over, I think it was on this film.
Yeah, it'll come up.
There are the pockmarks in the side. That's from a blast. Someone was here, that's obviously blood. But you can see most cars are burned, this one is not. There's another one over here that's not. So you can tell this was a constricted explosion somewhere. Maybe didn't even touch the ground.
This also shows it here. This is a zoom in of this, kind of exactly what you were talking about as well.
And look at these cars, nothing. So it is very compelling, but when you also look at that aftermath, where's the crater? When you're talking about a crater from an Israeli bomb, there's going to be a hole there.
And again, this is why the Israelis did release images. These are of craters. craters that they say are formed when they drop bombs from airplanes, and they say there are no craters here inside these parking lots.
Well, the problem with all this, as we've seen over the last 12 hours, information is important, but emotions took hold early on from both sides. The Israelis were very defensive. The Palestinians were very upset. There are indicators of some people wounded. It probably wasn't the numbers that they were citing last night. That's just conjecture on my part. But both sides are blaming the other, and that's what happens in war.
General, can you, it sounds, this is a flippant way of saying it, but can you put the genie back in the bottle with more information?
You can, partially, Kate, but you're talking about those Arab street all over the Middle East last night. We saw films in every single capital with hundreds of thousands of people, in every one of those. Iraq, in Baghdad, in Iran, Turkey, in Egypt. So when you say, okay, we've now got more facts, potentially, and if you believe the Israelis, and they have compelling facts, how do you put that genie back in the bottle?
Can we hit it? Go ahead, John.
I was going to just put this back up one more time, the video of this. And again, there is also audio released. The IDF released audio of what it purports to be Hamas officials talking about this blast after it happened. Hopefully we'll play that for you in a bit. But just to sum it up, do Islamic Jihad rockets fall from the sky like this?
All the time.
Misfires happen.
All the time. Misfires happen. I don't want to give a percentage because I don't know. But because of the quality of these rockets, and we've seen the same thing in Ukraine, in that conflict where they're using Russian rockets, they fall out of the sky, completely like this. They don't hit the targets. These are not precision weapons. These are aerial weapons. So you're not saying, hey, I'm going to hit that particular point on the ground. They go out and hopefully get in the area and cause damage. And sometimes they're just not very well made and they drop out of the sky.
Put it all together, what we have see here, what the IDF has put out, and then the new information, as Caitlin was just reporting, that President Biden says that this data that he was provided from the U.S. Defense Department that helped him get to a place of comfort and confidence that this was not Israel, this was Islamic Jihad. What does that do to you, your level of confidence, when we are in the fog of war? We are somewhat flying blind, obviously, as analysts.
Well, first of all, every time in war, things happen. Bad things happen to either side. So, we've seen the distrust at times of the Israeli force. In 2014, when Israel went into Gaza, the war stopped basically because of the amount of civilian casualties. But it's also Hamas's approach. It's their strategic objectives. Number one, kill a lot of Jews. Number two, embarrass the nation of Israel. This is a factor in embarrassing the nation of Israel early on. The Hamas Ministry of Health last night immediately said that this was an Israeli attack. Israel, kind of hemmed and hawed for a little while, but then they said early last night, we have information. We're going to send it out shortly as soon as we get it translated and compiled. They did that later. There's a lot of compelling facts. And again, it's a back and forth, not just facts, but emotions. Emotions play a big part in warfare.
All right, General Mark Herling, thank you very much for helping us understand the evidence that exists right now. And obviously, a whole lot of people analyzing what else is out there as well. General, thank you.
Coming up, more reporting on the protests that we saw overnight erupting across the Middle East following this deadly blast yesterday outside the hospital in Gaza. The new State Department warning now for Americans. And also, getting back to the United States, on Capitol Hill, the House of Representatives back at it again, set to convene for a second vote to get a new House Speaker after Jim Jordan fell pretty short, well short, of getting the votes that he needed and support he needed in the first go-around. We'll take you there.
Attention Medicare beneficiaries. This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Attention everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about 2024 Medicare Advantage plans. If you don't have a 2024 Medicare Advantage Part C plan, call now because there may be a Medicare Part C plan with additional benefits available in your zip code. Right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. You can call now to see if there are any changes to your current Medicare plan in the upcoming year or find out if you're eligible to enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan with additional additional benefits. Everyone on Medicare is encouraged to call. Call now and a licensed insurance agent can look up your plan and see if there are any changes to your current plan in the upcoming year. Call now during the Medicare annual enrollment period. Part C plans can change every year. Don't wait. Call before the Medicare annual enrollment period ends on December 7th for your free, no obligation 2024 Medicare benefits review. Call 800-882-0987. 800-882-0987. Attention Medicare beneficiaries. This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Attention everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about 2024 Medicare Advantage plans. If you don't have a 2024 Medicare Advantage Part C plan, call now because there may be a Medicare Part C plan with additional benefits available in your zip code. Right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. You can call now to see if there are any changes to your current Medicare plan in the upcoming year or find out if you're eligible to enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan with additional benefits. Everyone on Medicare is encouraged to call. Call now and a licensed insurance agent can look up your plan and see if there are any changes to your current plan in the upcoming year. Call now during the Medicare annual enrollment period. Part C plans can change every year. Don't wait. Call before the Medicare annual enrollment period ends on December 7th for your free, no obligation 2024 Medicare benefits review. Call 800-882-0987. 800-882-0987.
Hi, it's Christina again. I'm here to tell you about an all-new special offer from my friends at Jacuzzi Bath Remodel that you don't want to miss. You already know, Jacuzzi has been making water feel great for more than 65 years. And now, they're bringing you this special TV offer. We're waiving all installation costs and postponing all payments for 1 year. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel has a design you'll love at a price you can afford. And, best of all, they can install it in as little as 1 day with no stress and no mess. Are you ready to see your new shower? Here it is.
It's fabulous! Taking a shower had gone from being a joy to being a burden. I was afraid I would fall. I called in just 1 day. I had a shower I could feel safe in.
No matter your situation, Jacuzzi Bath Remodel has a solution for you. From a safer, easy entry shower with features like grab bars and a custom seat to keep you feeling comfortable and independent at home, to a stunning family bath, or how about a luxurious upgrade with a timeless design that will look great for years to come. Plus, they're built to last with a lifetime warranty from an iconic brand you know you can trust.
It was done the same day. We did not have to wait.
Absolutely perfect. It's exactly what I was dreaming of. If you haven't already experienced what Jacuzzi Bath Remodel can do for you, your family, and your home, don't wait any longer. Now is the best time to call. It's never been easier. Take advantage of this special TV offer today.
Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-321-0299. That's 800-321-0299. Call now.
All right, we have this just coming into CNN. A U.S. defense official says that the U.S. had to shoot down 2 attack drones that were targeting U.S. forces in Iraq. There were no injuries there, and it is not clear who exactly launched the drones, but such attacks, they say, are frequently attributed to Iran or Iranian-backed militants in the region. The news comes, of course, as American embassies have been facing protests in a number of Middle East countries because of the war in Gaza. Right now, in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, hundreds of protesters are gathered in the streets as they were overnight. This is video, I think, of overnight. They tried to break through security barriers near the U.S. Embassy. And these are live. Okay, so I can't, it's difficult for me to see where I'm from my vantage point, but yes, these are live pictures happening right now. You see lots of smoke. You see people in the streets. They are clearly, terribly upset about what is happening next door to Lebanon, in Gaza in particular. You can hear the chants, hundreds of people. Let's bring in CNN's Ben Wiedemann, who is in South Lebanon, live for us. Ben, can you just give us a sense of what you've been seeing on the ground, what you've been hearing from your sources about these protests?
Well, we're hearing some large explosions just to the south of here near the border with Israel. But these protests are very much reflective of many people in Lebanon. Particularly, it's been simmering since the 7th of October, but particularly since that strike on the hospital in Gaza yesterday. Last night we saw protests outside the U.S. Embassy. It's north of Beirut. It's actually not in Beirut. It's about 8 miles north of Beirut. And of course, again, we're seeing it today with protesters throwing rocks and shooting fireworks at the Lebanese police responding with water cannons. And
the harm that misinformation can do. The harm that false misinformation can do. Laying the blame for something on a group, on a country, on a state, on Israel, to the harm that misinformation can do. When it's been proven that it was the other team. Yeah, I think you've seen the videos that show scientific proof. We'll now throw that into the mayhem and destruction there. People are too caught up in it and busy in it to care. The misinformation war, the blame game, the misinformation war, it's at it again. It's at it again. That misinformation can do. The Islamic Jihad knew instantly the mistake they made, but they knew. Just blame Israel, and everything will be all right for us. We'll get people all in a fuss.
We are seeing now, because Jordan also has a huge number of Palestinians that live in Jordan and that have reacted in a very big way to what has happened in Gaza. All of these protests coming, of course, after a hospital was struck by someone. We do not know who at this point in time. We have not independently confirmed any of it, but Israel blaming Islamic Jihad, and of course Hamas blaming Israeli airstrikes. Can you give us some sense of just context of what we're seeing now in neighboring countries to Israel?
Well, what we're seeing is that it's boiling over. The anger, people have been watching very closely, intensely, what's going on in Gaza. There's been scattered protests, but certainly yesterday, I think that anger boiled over. It boiled over in Amman, where protesters went to the Israeli embassy, set fires around it, tried to get in, but were pushed back by Jordanian police. In Ramallah is a particularly important place. It's essentially the capital of the Palestinian Authority. There we saw protesters clashing with Palestinian security forces. The protesters were condemning what is happening in Gaza, but in addition to that, they were calling for the downfall of Mahmoud Abbas, the 87-year-old president of the Palestinian Authority, who many Palestinians see as ineffectual. He's been passive during this current war. He doesn't seem to have any sway with the Israelis, who don't respect the system of zones, areas that exist in the West Bank, where in theory the Palestinian Authority is supposed to be in control, but the Israeli security forces go in as they please without any coordination with the Palestinians. In short, it's a very shaky regime in the West Bank, and much of the anger, in addition to being directed at Israel, is directed at what is seen as a corrupt and ineffectual Palestinian Authority. Sarah?
Really good reporting, really good context. Thank you so much, Ben Wiedemann, for being there on the ground. Are you still hearing some munitions, it sounds like, behind you?
Scattered, yes, but this very moment, no.
Okay.
Sarah.
Okay. All right. Keeping you and your crew as safe as possible in these difficult conditions. Thank you, Ben. Kate, I'm going to go ahead and send it back to you. I just want to mention we are watching these live pictures of an extraordinary number of people who have come out to the streets. This is in Beirut. We are watching this live. People reacting. So upset to see what has happened, particularly in the hospital strike that has, according to Hamas, killed hundreds of people, including obviously patients, men, women, and children. Kate?
Yeah, the anger and outrage that was sparked last night is spreading like wildfires. We can see continuing today. We're going to continue to watch these live pictures. We're going to get back to Sarah in Tel Aviv shortly. Coming up, President Biden says that he was shown evidence, data is how he put it, from the U.S. Defense Department about the deadly hospital blast in Gaza, giving him the confidence, he says, to say that Israel was not behind that deadly blast. Democratic Congressman and Iraq War veteran Seth Moulton joins us next.
When you're looking for answers, it's good to have help, because the right information at the right time may make all the difference. At Humana, we know that's especially true when you're looking for a Medicare supplement insurance plan. That's why we're offering 7 things every Medicare supplement should have. It's yours free, just for calling the number on your screen. And when you call, a knowledgeable licensed agent producer can answer any questions you have and help you choose the plan that's right for you. The call is free and there's no obligation. You see, Medicare covers only about 80% of your Part B medical expenses. The rest is up to you. That's why so many people purchase Medicare supplement insurance plans like those offered by Humana. They're designed to help you save money and pay some of the costs Medicare doesn't. Depending on the Medicare supplement plan you select, you could have no deductibles or co-payments for doctor visits, hospital stays, emergency care, and more. You can keep the doctors you have now, ones you know and trust, with no referrals needed. Plus, you can get medical care anywhere in the country, even when you're traveling. With Humana, you get a competitive monthly premium and personalized service from a healthcare partner working to make healthcare simpler and easier for you. You can choose from a wide range of standardized plans. Each one is designed to work seamlessly with Medicare and help save you money. So how do you find the plan that's right for you? One that fits your needs and your budget. Call Humana now at the number on your screen for this free guide. It's just one of the ways that Humana is making healthcare simpler. And when you call, a knowledgeable licensed agent producer can answer any questions you have and help you choose the plan that's right for you. The call is free and there's no obligation. You know Medicare won't cover all your medical costs, so call now and see why a Medicare supplement plan from a company like Humana just might be the answer.
Before my doctor and I chose Breztri for my COPD, I had bad days. Flare-ups that could permanently damage my lungs. With Breztri, things changed for me. Breztri gave me better breathing. Starting within 5 minutes, I noticed my lung function improved. It helped improve my symptoms. And Breztri was even proven to reduce flare-ups, including those that could send me to the hospital. So now, I look forward to more good days.
Breztri won't replace a rescue inhaler for sudden breathing problems. It is not for asthma. Tell your doctor if you have a heart condition or high blood pressure before taking it. Don't take Breztri more than prescribed. Breztri may increase your risk of thrush, pneumonia, and osteoporosis. Call your doctor if worsened breathing, chest pain, mouth or tongue swelling, problems urinating, vision changes, or eye pain occur. Can't afford your medication? AstraZeneca may be able to help.
Ask your doctor about Breztri.
Being a journalist is the best job in the world. Asking challenging questions of the folks who run the world. Is Ukraine going to win this war?
Yes, of course.
You ready?
The Lead with Jake Tapper, CNN Today at 4.
Stop! I'm a good zombie!
This October,
Trick or treat!
spirits come home to rest all month long.
This place is really haunted. What a weird mystery.
With Hollow Scream on Disney Plus.
We're gonna scare you. Boom.
Home is where the hunt is.
It's time.
Aviv. And this is CNN.
This is video from moments ago, and what you're looking at is what is unfolding in Beirut, Lebanon, where protests are picking back up once again. There's fire burning there, sparked by outrage over the deadly explosion outside the hospital in Gaza. Now, this morning in Israel, we are standing by to hear from President Biden once again. Already this morning, after he touched down, he's reiterated U.S. support for Israel. And CNN also has new reporting just in that President Biden said behind closed doors he was shown data from the Pentagon that gave him the confidence to say Tuesday's deadly blast at the Gaza hospital was not carried out by Israeli forces. Hamas quickly blamed Israel for the attack after it happened, but Israel has said that an Islamic Jihad rocket misfired and hit the hospital. CNN cannot independently confirm what caused the blast. This is messy, and this is the reality of where things stand right now. Joining us right now is Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee. He's also a Marine Corps veteran. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time. We have this new information from President Biden saying behind closed doors that it's the U.S. Defense Department that provided him data that gave him the confidence to say Israel was not behind the deadly blast outside the Gaza hospital, which is obviously in conflict to what Hamas is claiming. What are you hearing about this?
Well, look, I'm going to believe an American president and our closest ally in the Middle East, a Democratic ally, over a terrorist organization any day of the week, a terrorist organization that has slaughtering civilians written into their organizational charter. We're going to have a classified briefing for the Armed Services Committee today in the House at 2 p.m. to hopefully get more details, but it sounds pretty clear that this was not caused by the Israelis. It's a horrific, horrific disaster, but obviously we want to find out the truth about what happened.
Can you give me information about who's going to be briefing you? Because the question I think you need to know, obviously it's going to be classified, so what comes out is going to be limited. But do you believe that the Department of Defense has data that's going to be able to show this one way or the other, where the origins of this rocket and blast came from?
Well, we're watching this conflict very closely, the Defense Department, our intelligence agencies, so I expect they have a fairly good idea, and obviously the President feels confident in his assessment, at least from the reports of what he said. So I hope to have a better answer after 2 o'clock this afternoon.
An important day. I mean, every day in this has been important. This will prove critical, especially after, and we can show video once again of what we have just this morning of protests. It looks like violent protests breaking out once again. This morning we're seeing it in Beirut, Lebanon, but very quickly the news last night of the blast, it spread like wildfire through the Arab world, sparking protests in multiple places. Protesters at one point were trying to break into the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. I mean, how much do images like this worry you? Can this outrage be calmed down?
Well, we need to get to the truth here, but the bottom line is that wars like this are incredibly messy. And one of the things that Israel has to be very careful about going forward is they have to recognize that they are in a counterinsurgency fight, where their actions that they take can not only kill terrorists, but can also recruit more terrorists to the cause. We call this insurgent math. General Stanley McChrystal, famed U.S. general, estimated this as 10 to 1, that for every one innocent civilian you kill, you recruit about 10 terrorists to the cause. So Israel is right to try to kill off the leadership of Hamas that perpetrated these heinous, barbaric assaults on Israeli civilians. They need to do that to keep Israel safe, but they also can't recruit more terrorists in the process. That doesn't keep Israel safe either. So how Israel prosecutes this war and how they're able to avoid civilian casualties is actually incredibly important, not just to Palestinian human rights, but to their own success.
You know, something that really does not happen has, on many levels, but the President of the United States essentially being canceled on by allies as he's on his way to critical meetings, with Jordan and Egypt pulling out of the summit that was planned. How damaging is this? What do you think Biden should do about it in this moment?
Well, look, I mean, it's not damaging to President Biden. He's doing the right thing. He's going, right into the conflict here, into the conflict zone to try to better understand what's going on. But it is representative of just the dangerousness of this whole conflict in the Middle East and the potential for it to expand into a wider regional war. Part of the reason that President Biden is going to the Middle East is to try to tamp down those tensions, to talk to both our allies and send messages to our adversaries that we can't let this expand further.
Look, you wrote a really compelling piece about essentially lessons learned, and you were touching on it just there, lessons learned from your time in Iraq, decisions by the administration then, what Israel can learn from that. And there are many moments that you write about and also that you witnessed that I wonder if you see this moment, this blast, the explosion, the aftermath, the reaction, the outrage. Could this be a watershed moment in this conflict?
Well, it could be, and you don't know for sure, but think back to that horrible tragedy at Abu Ghraib, the prison in Iraq where detainees were abused by American troops. Now, if you look at that measure, an event in isolation, it didn't seem like it was terrible, but it didn't seem like a huge deal. There weren't a lot of people killed or anything like that. And yet, the psychological effect that it had on the whole conflict was massive. When you had civilians killed in Iraq, it had massive effects on the entire war effort. And that is exactly what Israel has to be very careful about here. Now, if it turns out that Israel didn't drop the bomb on this hospital, then they can obviously make that case to the world community. But even if they make that case, it's a reality of these counterinsurgency campaigns, fighting in an urban environment, that innocents are going to get killed, and that can actually impact your ability to achieve your mission. What Israel needs to be very clear here is to articulate what is their end game. Where is this all going? Because if they just go into Gaza and leave it a smoldering mess, they're going to end up recruiting more terrorists than they killed, and they'll be right back to square one. None of us want to see that.
Hard lessons learned, definitely from past U.S. conflicts. Congressman, thank you so much for your time.
We made a lot of mistakes. We made a lot of mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we want to help the Israelis not repeat them.
Congressman, thank you. John.
All right, counting down to a new vote for House Speaker. That is, if it doesn't get canceled. In the first vote, Republican Jim Jordan fell way shorter than expected. We have new reporting on where he stands at this minute, and the new backup plan being formulated by House Republicans that, by the way, concern that man you're looking at in the bow tie.
Actually, you don't need vision to do most things in life. Yes, I'm legally blind, and yes, I'm responsible for the user interface. Data visualization. If I can see it and understand it quickly, anyone can. Making complex things clear. That's how I help people thrive. People who know BDO.
Pro-level performance at work and at home. Right now, save $30 on the BG56 CE blower. Real steel. Find yours.
Dry skin is sensitive skin too, and it's natural. Treat it that way with Aveeno Daily Moisture. Formulated with nourishing prebiotic oat. It's clinically proven to moisturize dry skin for 24 hours. Aveeno.
This is spring semester, and over 13,000 U.S. school districts, which have become top targets for ransomware attacks. But there's never been a reported ransomware attack on a Chromebook, which is why thousands of schools, like the Fairfield-Sassoon Unified School District, switch to Google Tools for education. So they can focus on teaching, and 22,000 students can focus on learning, knowing that their data is secure.
Something unexpected has arrived from Experian, the new Experian Smart Money debit card and digital checking account. It finds payments that could erase your credit scores without the debt. Get your new Experian Smart Money account through the Experian app.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories. The night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
Very soon this morning, the House is set to be back at it and give it a second go. Still trying to elect a new speaker. Jim Jordan scrambling overnight to try to secure more votes and also lose less votes after he failed to win the gavel yesterday. 20 members of his own party not backing him. A reminder, with such a slim margin in the House already, Jordan can only afford to now lose 4 votes if he wants to win the speakership. How far away, is he getting further away from it or closer? Let's get back to Lauren Fox, who's on Capitol Hill. What are you hearing today, Lauren?
Yeah, we've spoken this morning with Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, and he is vowing to stay in this race, Kate, despite the fact that, like you said, he lost 20 Republican votes. He could lose even more on a second ballot this morning at 11 a.m. when he goes to the floor to continue this fight to become the speaker. But he says he thinks that the answer is to get a Republican speaker. He says, I've got 90% of the conference. I think I can get there. Here is what he told me moments ago.
You got to get a speaker so we can open the House. So I'm going to get there. Look, I already proven I can get from the most conservative members of the conference to the more moderate members of the conference. So whole cross section of the conference, it's important that we get the last few. We got.
And here's what is worth watching today on the House floor. Does he actually pick up support? He told me that he hopes so, that he thinks he can get more support, but there are a number of members who are working to try and make sure that the number of members voting against Jordan actually grows today. If that happens, I pressed him on if he'd go to a third ballot or if he would drop out. He did not answer that question specifically, got on the elevator and left his office. But one thing to keep in mind today is that Republicans are discussing a potential alternative, which is to bring a resolution to the floor of the House, which would empower Patrick McHenry temporarily to bring legislation to the floor to have the full power of a speaker pro tem. Right now, because he was appointed by McCarthy, there's very little he can do on the floor, but a lot of members are losing patience because they're looking around saying, this is 2 weeks into this fight for speaker. We still do not have someone who can get 217 votes. It's time to do something for Israel. It's time to make sure that we don't have a government shutdown on November 17th when the government runs out of money. So that is why this momentum is gaining around the idea of basically empowering Patrick McHenry. Kate?
I mean, talk about a Band-Aid, I mean, but also just exposing how far apart they really may be. It's good to see you, Lauren. Keep us updated. Johnson.
With us now, former Republican Congressman from Michigan, Fred Upton. Congressman, great to see you. Oh my God, the beautiful, great outdoors there. Listen, I'm not sure you're going to like this analysis, but some people are looking at the fact that Jordan lost 20 votes yesterday and may lose more today is coming from the fact that moderates, they say, are finally showing some spine, refusing to crumble. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, if you look at Jordan's track record, he opposed, I think, every single appropriation bill throughout his entire career. He voted against health research. He led the opposition to even an Amber Alert system for active shooters that even the NRA did not oppose. So it's that kind of, you know, in a divided government, you got to work together. You got to get things done. The world is afire. I mean, not only Israel, but Ukraine. You got the looming shutdown again that no one wants to go through. We had a budget agreement that was bipartisan last June, and people walked away from that. And I think he opposed that as well. But at the end of the day, you got to get things done. You got to get 60 votes in the Senate. You got to have a president that can sign the bill, not veto it. And, you know, so it's time to get moving. And you're going to have a Republican speaker, no matter what. Patrick McHenry is a really able guy. His word is his bond. He's thoughtful. He's intelligent. He could actually, I think, swing a deal with many, if not most, of the Republicans But from the Democratic side, and I talked to some in the last couple of days, I'm sure Lauren and Manu have, on your team, we're tired of this. We need a speaker. We need to send the ship forward, not keep it at port in this world that is so troubled today. So it's time to get moving. If Jordan loses votes, and I suspect that he will today, I mean, it was a little bit of a surprise that there were 20 that were against him. Remember the first time that Kevin ran, when they had the 15 ballots, Kevin McCarthy, there were only 19 Republicans that opposed him. If there's 20, there were 20 yesterday. If it goes to 25 or so, I think Jordan's going to have to throw in the cards. Big loss for Trump, because he supported Jordan not only last week but this week as well. They're making calls. Hannity's making calls. I don't think it's going to happen. It's time to turn the page and get a captain of the ship.
There is this email that's being circulated, text messages. Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska, one of the people who voted against Jim Jordan yesterday, released these text messages that his wife got. One of them said, "Your husband will not hold any political office ever again. What a disappointment and failure he is." What does it tell you that there's that kind of lobbying effort?
Well, it's really nasty. And I would guess that there were even more brutal calls and texts that probably the FCC would ban you from allowing to be on the air. I was the victim of that when I was one of those that supported impeachment. There's a nasty public out there, and that's one of the things that Jordan's people have done. His supporters, I should say, hopefully not him, but they've organized this attack group from all different cycles, and it's I guess it's part of public life these days, but it's a really bad turn. And Bacon, to his credit, released it just to show the pressure that he was under. But all of those 20, there was enormous pressure. They were breaking arms and legs trying to get the votes that they did. And I think a number of my former colleagues are saying enough of this junk. I got a different word for it. Enough of this junk. Let's move on and stop this awful threats that are imposed, particularly on family members, but as well as staff. I mean, they're the victims of this too. The calls that come into the offices.
Well, the vote will happen in about an hour from now if they limp in on their broken legs and cast their votes with their twisted arms. Fred Upton, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you very much. Kate?
Coming up for us, the new warning from the the head of the World Health Organization, that the situation in Gaza is spiraling out of control. Hospitals are running out of supplies. Supplies are still stuck at the border with Egypt, and now confusion and anger over the deadly blast outside the Gaza hospital last night. That's next.
Ivisia Dry Eye Drops. Made with hydrating polymers, moisturizing hyaluronic acid, and revitalizing trehalose. For instant dryness relief that lasts up to 8 hours. Ivisia, we see a better way.
The right age for Neutrogena retinol? That's whenever you want it to be. It has derm-proven retinol that targets vital cell turnover, even skin tone, and smooths fine lines. With visible results in just 1 week. Neutrogena retinol.
Our mission here at CNN is that the news comes first. That's the promise of the Situation Room. We work as hard as we can to get the facts.
The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, tonight at 6 on CNN.
Are you sick of power outages? Tired of sitting in the dark, not knowing when the lights will come back on?
That's why we created this amazing new solar generator.
It's powerful and expandable, so it runs your fridge and critical devices.
Protects your family because it's fume-free and safe to use inside.
Plus, you'll get this solar panel free. Go to 4patriots.com.
Do it now. Get your solar generator with free shipping and free panel at 4patriots.com.
I'm Martha Stewart, and this is one of my new kittens. Of course, I want to give them the happiest, healthiest life possible, which is why I choose Pretty Litter. We love this litter because it's tough on odor and helps keep tabs on their health by changing color to show high, low, and typical pH levels. Pretty Litter is also low dust. And whether you're a new cat parent or a lifelong cat lover like me, this low-maintenance litter is the game changer. Try it today. Go to prettylitter.com.
I'm Warren Lieberman at the Pentagon, and this is CNN.
I'll talk to you in a minute in the break. All right, any moment now, the President Biden is expected to speak in Israel again after a series of meetings that he had with the Israeli Prime Minister, his war cabinet, and the families of people impacted by the Hamas attack. We want to tell you right now, we are seeing Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who has come into that room. You see the room set up there with all the reporters waiting for President Biden to show up. Look, he's already faced questions at this point in time about that deadly explosion at the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital in Gaza, that according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health run by Hamas, that hundreds of people were killed in a place that is supposed to be set aside for healing. It has disturbed everyone in the world, but in particular, it has caused major protests in the neighboring countries. There is a huge protest ongoing right now in Beirut. In particular, have been protests in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan, right across the way. So this is really causing a lot of disturbance. As you might imagine, people are very upset. As to who is responsible for it, there is still, we cannot confirm or verify any of the information at this point, but Israel says it has proof that it was not responsible, that it wasn't from an airstrike. They have some recordings that have been put out of what they say is Islamic jihadists who accidentally misfired and their rocket hit the hospital. Let us now go to Caitlin Collins, who is following all of this and the president's visit. Caitlin, you look at what is happening right now and the situation that we're in. This is probably, except for October 7th, the most tense it has been here in this country because of that attack or that misfire, whichever one it is, on the hospital. It has heightened tensions, and now the President of the United States is here. How is he responding to all of this, and how is he treating Israel as he is going to be standing side by side with the Prime Minister?
Yeah, and that has kind of loomed, Sarah, over this entire visit. It was something that the White House was dealing with as his plane was preparing to take off from right outside Washington yesterday, and it's something that he's been asked about at essentially every stop of this visit today. Obviously, it's a visit that is cut shorter because he's no longer going to Jordan to meet with the leader there and the president of Egypt, and instead he's about to come out here behind me and make remarks, and that will really be the culmination of President Biden's time here in Tel Aviv. It started out in that one-on-one with Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier this morning, and that is where he embraced those denials by Israel, saying that they were not responsible for that explosion of that hospital in Gaza City. And instead, just a few moments ago, President Biden said that it was analysis and data from his own Pentagon that he was using, and that it was part of his assertion that he did not believe that Israel was behind it. Obviously, Israel has forcefully denied that. Palestinian authorities have said that they do believe the IDF is behind it. They have said it was not them. That has been part of this, but it's certainly not the only factor in this entire trip. And one big question that still remains is whether or not that humanitarian aid is going to be able to get into Gaza to those civilians who are still there and have not been able to get any of that and have seen, obviously, no power, no electricity, no internet for the last several days. That is going to be a big question for President Biden when he comes out here. It's something that his Secretary of State has been working on, going back and forth between several countries in the last several days. He's actually here in the room and has been in these meetings with President Biden. And so that will be a big question as he comes into this room. I should note, sitting behind me are several of the first responders from that day and several of the families of the victims and the families of the hostages that were taken and captured by Hamas. That has probably been the most somber part of the president's day, was when he was in the room with them here. And of course, that is a moment where he talked with them. He shared some Irish poetry with them. And that is part of what he is going to address when he does come out here in just a few moments.
Yeah, one of the things that is happening, of course, is that everyone is taking to their sides, as happens in this conflict more than perhaps anywhere else I have ever seen in the world. But you do have information that has come out. There are people questioning Israel when it comes to whether or not they were involved in the attack, partly because of what the PM's office put out about those babies that they said were beheaded, which turned out that they did not have proof of. And now you've got Hamas, which has certainly said things that are absolutely not true, blaming Israel for this, and the rest of the Arab world really blaming Israel for this when Israel says it has evidence against it. How does President Biden sort of thread this needle? Because, he's got to be able, for humanitarian purposes, to talk with, for example, the Palestinian Authority, to try and get some support from places like Jordan, the King of Jordan, in order to try and make this happen. How is he trying to do that? Is he having those conversations behind the scenes as well? I know you're very plugged in, Caitlin.
Well, it's been really difficult because obviously having them face to face is much different than having a phone call, and that is what he's expected to do when he leaves here, is have that phone call with the president of Egypt instead of actually meeting with him in person, as initially officials were hoping that they would do. And they have not denied that that obviously is a setback. That is something that they wanted to happen, to actually have that meeting happen in person. And that's another big question here, which is, on the way here, the White House said that Biden was going to have tough questions for Netanyahu about what is next for Israel. And if there is that ground invasion in Gaza, what does that look like? What are the objectives? And what is Israel going to do in the aftermath of that? Who would be in charge of Gaza if they do eradicate the leaders of Hamas, as Israel has said many times is its goal? So there are still a lot of major questions about the future of this conflict and what that looks like. And having those difficult conversations with a lot of these Arab leaders who have said that they don't believe necessarily Israel's denials about being involved in that explosion at that hospital in Gaza City, it's only adding to the complications of an already challenging visit. And it certainly is something, a needle that does have to be threaded, as you were stating there, Sarah. That is a big question for how that's handled and what those conversations look like going forward, because obviously it is something that Egypt has to be a part of.
Yeah, the diplomacy here is very difficult, very intricate, very complicated, if you will. Caitlin, stay with us as you're watching to see whether or not when President Biden is going to show up there and make remarks. And I think you said this is his sort of last remarks that we're probably going to hear from him while he is in Tel Aviv. I want to go to our Clarissa Ward, who is watching all of this as well. You and I both have been in Gaza several times. Can you describe to people who really don't know what it is like on the ground there, just how congested, just how filled of that small space is, 139 square miles, just how small it is, and just how difficult it is, for example, for the civilians on a regular day, not on during a time of war.
Well, Sarah, if you've been to Gaza as you have during times of intense bombardment, it is truly terrifying. There is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of confusion. There is a lot of panic. You see people running around trying to get to safety, not knowing where safety is. In the case of the Al-Ahli hospital, it's clear that hundreds of people thought that that would be a safe place to go to. It's worth mentioning that Al-Ahli is in the northern part of Gaza. That is the area that the IDF had asked people to leave and evacuate from on Friday. But we kept hearing over and over again from people that we've spoken to, how can we leave our homes and go to the south when there are continued strikes on the south? There were strikes close to the Rafah border crossing yesterday. There were strikes in Khan Yunis. On top of that, you have the fact that the humanitarian situation is rapidly spiraling out of control, even in the south, where people have been urged to move to. No electricity, no water, very, very little food. The UN warning that maybe there are 4 or 5 days worth of food left in stores. And so you have an almost a paralysis whereby people just don't know what to do. And it's always in those situations where civilians suffer the most, where they bear the brunt of the actions of both sides. And it's always in those situations where it is most challenging for diplomats to try to forge a path to some kind of respite or refuge for them.
Clarissa, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but the President of the United States is now talking.
Will not let you ever be alone. Most importantly, I know the recent terrorist assault on the people of this nation has left a deep, deep wound. More than 1,300 innocent Israelis killed, including at least 31 American citizens by the terrorist group Hamas. Hundreds of young people at a music festival. But the festival was for peace, gunned down as they ran for their lives. Scores of innocents, from infants to elderly grandparents, Israelis and Americans, taken hostage. Children slaughtered, babies slaughtered, entire families massacred. Rape, beheadings, bodies burned alive. Hamas committed atrocities that recall the worst ravages of ISIS, unleashing pure, unadulterated evil upon the world. There's no rationalizing it, no excusing it, period. The brutality we saw would have cut deep anywhere in the world, but it cuts deeper here in Israel. October 7th, which was a sacred Jewish holiday, became the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It has brought to the surface painful memories and scars left by millennia of anti-Semitism and the genocide of the Jewish people. The world watched then, it knew, and the world did nothing. We will not stand by and do nothing again. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. To those who are living in limbo, waiting desperately to learn the fate of a loved one, especially to families of the hostages, you're not alone. We're working with partners throughout the region, pursuing every avenue to bring home those who are being held captive by Hamas. I can't speak publicly about all the details, but let me assure you, for me, as the American president, there's no higher priority than the release and safe return of all these hostages. For those who are grieving, a child, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, I know you feel like there's that black hole in the middle of your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it. The survivor's remorse, the anger, the questions of faith in your soul, staring at that empty chair, sitting Shiva. The first Sabbath without them. They're the everyday things, the small things that you miss the most. The scent when you open the closet door. The morning coffee you shared together. The bend of his smile, the perfect picture of a laugh. The giggle of your little boy, the baby. For those who have lost loved ones, this is what I know. They'll never be truly gone. There's something that's never fully lost. Your love for them and their love for you. And I promise you, you'll be walking along some days and say, what would she or he want me to do? You smile when you pass a place that reminds you of them. That's when you know. When a smile comes to your lips before a tear to your eye, that's when you know you're going to fully make it. That's what will give you the fortitude to find light in the darkest hours. When terrorists believe they could bring you down, bend your will, break your resolve. But they never did and they never will. Instead, we saw incredible stories of heroism and courage. Israelis taking care of one another. Neighbors forming watch groups to protect their kibbutz. Opening their homes to shelter survivors. Retired soldiers running into danger once again. Civilian medics flying across rescue missions. And off-duty medics at the music festival caring for the wounded before becoming a victim himself. Volunteers retrieving bodies of the dead so families could bury their loved ones in accordance with Jewish tradition. Reservists leaving behind their families, their honeymoons, their studies abroad without hesitation, and so much more. The state of Israel was born to be a safe place for the Jewish people of the world. That's why I was born. I've long said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. While it may not feel that way today, Israel must again be a safe place for the Jewish people. And I promise you, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure there will be. 75 years ago, just 11 minutes after its founding, President Harry S. Truman and the United States of America became the first nation to recognize Israel. We've stood by your side ever since. We're going to stand by your side now. My administration was in close touch with your leadership from the first moments of this attack. We're going to make sure you have what you need to protect your people, to defend your nation. For decades, we've ensured Israel's qualitative military edge. And later this week, I'm going to ask the United States Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We're going to keep Iron Dome fully supplied so we can continue standing sentinel over Israeli skies, saving Israeli lives. We've moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way to defer further aggression against Israel, and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. And my message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't. Since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. Though for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives. The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas. Palestinian people are suffering greatly as well. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives like the entire world. I was outraged and saddened by the enormous loss of life yesterday in the hospital in Gaza. Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. The United States unequivocally stands for the protection of civilian life during conflict, and I truly grieve for the families who were killed or wounded by this tragedy. The people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that there will be inspections and that the aid should go to civilians, not to Hamas. Israel agreed the humanitarian assistance can begin to move from Egypt to Gaza. But let me be clear, if Hamas diverts or steals the assistance, they will have demonstrated once again that they have no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. And it will end. As a practical matter, it will stop the international community from being able to provide this aid. We're working in close cooperation with the government of Egypt, the United Nations, and its agencies like the World Food Program and other partners in the region to get trucks moving across the border as soon as possible. Separately, I ask Israel that the global community demand that the International Red Cross be able to visit hostages. I just demanded that the United States fully supports. Today, I'm also announcing $100 million in new U.S. funding for humanitarian assistance in both Gaza and the West Bank. This money will support more than 1 million displaced and conflict-affected Palestinians, including emergency needs in Gaza. You are a Jewish state. You are a Jewish state, but you're also a democracy. And like the United States, you don't live by the rules of terrorists. You live by the rule of law. And when conflicts flare, you live by the law of wars. What sets us apart from the terrorists is we believe in the fundamental dignity of every human life. Israeli, Palestinian, Arab, Jew, Muslim, Christian, everyone. You can't give up what makes you who you are. If you give that up, then the terrorists win, and we can never let them win. You know, Israel's a miracle, a triumph of faith and resolve and resilience over impossible pain and loss. Think about October 7th, the Jewish holiday, where you read about the death of Moses, a tragic story of a profound loss to an entire nation, a death that could have left hopelessness in the hearts of the entire nation. But though Moses died, his memory, his message, his lessons have lived on for generations of the Jewish people as well as many others, just as the memory of your loved ones will live on as well. After reading the story of Moses' death, those who observed the holiday began reading the Torah from the very beginning. The story of creation reminds us of two things. First, that when we get knocked down, we get back up again, and we begin anew. And second, when we're faced with tragedy and loss, we must go back to the beginning and remember who we are. We're all human beings, created in the image of God with dignity, humanity, and purpose. In the darkness, to be the light unto the world is what we're about. You inspire hope and light for so many around the world. That's what the terrorists seek to destroy. That's what they seek to destroy. Because they live in darkness. But not you. Not Israel. Nations of conscience like the United States and Israel are not measured solely by the example or power, and we're measured by the power of our example. And that's why, as hard as it is, we must keep pursuing peace. We must keep pursuing a path so that Israel and the Palestinian people can both live safely, in security, in dignity, and in peace. For me, that means a two-state solution. We must keep working for Israel's greater integration with its neighbors. These attacks only strengthen my commitment and determination and my will to get that done. I'm here to tell you, the terrorists will not win. Freedom will win. So let me end where I began. Israel, you're not alone. The United States stands with you. I've told the story before, and I'll tell it again, of my first meeting with an Israeli prime minister 50 years ago as a young senator. I was sitting across from Golda Meir at her desk in her office, and she had a guy who later became prime minister, sit next to me, just before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And she flipped the maps up and down, telling me how bad things were and how terrible they were. All of a sudden she looked at me and she said, "Would you like a photograph?" I looked at her. She got up from her desk and walked out into that hallway. I think it's marble flooring. Walked down the hallway. And walked out, and there were a bunch of photographers standing in front of us. We were standing shoulder to shoulder. Without her looking at me, she said to me, knowing I'd hear her, "Why do you look so worried, Senator Biden?" And I said, "Worried? Like, of course I'm worried." And she looked at me, and she didn't look. She said, "Don't worry, Senator. We Israelis have a secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go." Well, today, I say to all of Israel, the United States isn't going anywhere either. We're going to stand with you. We'll walk beside you in those dark days. And we'll walk beside you in the good days to come. And they will come. As you say in Hebrew, which I'm not going to attempt to do because I'm such a terrible linguist, I'll say it in English. The people of Israel live. The people of Israel live. Israel will be safe, secure, Jewish, and democratic state. Today, tomorrow, and forever. And God protect all those who work for peace. God save those who are still in harm's way. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, what is your take on the withdrawal of U.S. military involvement in this war?
Mr. President, your team said you had tough questions.
All right, you have just been listening to President Biden here in Israel, in Tel Aviv, talking about many different things. Number one, that he supports unequivocally Israel after that attack on October 7th, and talked about his long history with supporting this country all the way back to the 1970s, right before the Yom Kippur War, talking to Golda Meir, who was the prime minister at the time. By the way, the timing of that and the timing of this, almost exactly the same, the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, October 7th, when the attack happened here, that has really changed this nation and changed its position, as well as changed what it is willing to do to Hamas in Gaza. They are trying to, as all of the Israeli officials have said, rid all of Gaza of Hamas. I want to bring in our Caitlin Collins, who is standing by and was in the room, our David Chalian as well, and our Clarissa Ward, who is here also in Israel with us. Caitlin, I'm going to go to you first. What stood out to you in hearing from the president? I mean, this was another unequivocal support of Israel from the president of the United States.
Yeah, he loves telling that story there at the end. It was his first time here to Israel. It was 1972, 1 year before, of course, the 1973 Yom Kippur War. It had this lasting effect on him. He often talks about sitting down with Golda Meir when she was the prime minister of Israel. Obviously, things are very different now. Here he is returning as the president of the United States. Israel is at war. He's the first U.S. president to visit Israel when it is at war, something that the prime minister Netanyahu noted earlier today. But as the president came out here today, Sarah, he did make news. He said that Israel has agreed to an agreement to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza through Egypt. That has been something that has been a holdup for well over a week now, despite international talks to create some kind of channel to allow that aid in. You've heard Egyptian officials say they have trucks waiting at that Rafah crossing. That is the only way to get into Gaza through Egypt, waiting to get in, but it has been held up. They have blamed the Israelis. The Israelis have pushed back on that. The question, of course, that President Biden did not note is the timing of that. When will that aid begin to flow into Gaza? But he did say there is an agreement, and he also said that the U.S. is going to provide $100 million in assistance to Gaza and to the West Bank. Those are two notable developments coming out of here. One thing that we did ask President Biden at the end, as he did, as you're right, he expressed that solidarity with Israel once again, which was something his staff previewed on the way over here, which was tough questions they said he was going to have for the prime minister. And when you talk to officials about what those tough questions could be, they referenced what's next here. If Israel does go into Gaza, if there is that ground invasion, what does the timing of that look like? What is the objective of that? And what happens after that's over? You heard Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier warning that this could be a long road to victory, was the phrase that he used. Of course, the question is how long and what it looks like after that. That's President Biden left the room. He did not answer that question. He did issue another warning, though, about one of his main concerns, one of the biggest things that I've heard from officials that I've spoken to in recent days, which is the idea that this could escalate into a broader regional conflict. And that is only something that has become really more illuminated in the last 24 hours since that hospital was hit. I do want to note, earlier today, the president said he did not believe it was Israel that was behind that explosion at that hospital in Gaza. He said it was someone from the other team. Here, he clarified those remarks. He said he believed that, based on what he has heard and what he has seen, that it was an errant rocket from a Palestinian terrorist group. So that is an update there and a clarification there from his earlier remark that was not very clear to what he believes it is.
And that terrorist group that he is referring to, Israel says it was Islamic Jihad, not Hamas, but it is another group that exists there that does not believe in the existence of Israel itself. I want to go now, thank you, Caitlin, for that. Stick with us. I'm going to go now to David Chalian. David, can you tell us about just the significance that during an officially declared war, that the President of the United States came into this country trying to get some humanitarian work done, coming to just show solidarity, but just the significance of him being here, as we have seen rockets coming into this country every single day and night throughout. Meantime, there are explosions going on in Gaza at the same time, and a huge humanitarian crisis going on there. What's the significance of him being here now?
Well, Sarah, you saw the president himself highlighted that he was the first president to visit Israel in a time of war. He wanted to make sure everybody understood that it is indeed a significant move, and I think it was so clear what he was doing throughout his remarks. The whole first half, as you and Caitlin were discussing, was that complete repetition of that total solidarity with Israel, standing side by side in total support of Israel. And I think when you talk to folks around the president, what they believe that position does is allow him to go into the second half of his remarks, which was to call on the better angels and the humanitarian sympathies of the people of Israel, and not to get too consumed by their passions and anger in response to the terrorist attacks, and that they keep in mind who they are as a people, as he was trying to express the need for humanitarian assistance, for the ability for Israel to maintain its position by not or by urging some restraint. And I think when you look at the remarks and how they were structured, you see a president of the United States doing that very thing we've been talking about, which is threading a needle here. Obviously, time will tell. The future will only tell us if that is successful. But it's clear that's what the objective was in his visit, and putting a button on the visit with these remarks.
Yeah, diplomacy is of the utmost importance here, but very, very difficult to actually, as you put it, thread that needle. I want to go now to Clarissa Ward, who is here with me in Israel. I am curious from your perspective, after hearing what you did about the humanitarian breakthrough, hopefully, although it has not happened, and Gaza by the hour is getting more and more desperate for the civilians there. How you think that the Arab world, Jordan, people in Jordan, people who are protesting right now in Beirut, and the response in the West Bank, how they're going to react to hearing the president's comments from Tel Aviv today?
I think the reactions will not be positive. This will be seen as a full-throated endorsement of Israel and of Israel's comportment over the last 10 days, which obviously Arab countries have denounced. I think there will be a lot of talk about what wasn't said. There was no call for restraint. There was no call for a ceasefire. It's important to remind viewers that the leaders of these Arab countries have many young people who are now impassioned and outraged and upset and are taking to the streets. And so they have to be seen as taking a hard stance, as supporting the Palestinian people. They are also trying, just like President Biden, to thread the needle, if you will. He did say, as you mentioned, that there has been some agreement on the Israeli side to allow the passage of aid into Gaza, with the proviso that Hamas does not divert that aid. But he also said that he hoped that would happen as soon as possible, with no real clarity or sense of when that might be. And I agree with David that he did issue as well some gentle warnings to Israel after the first half of the speech, which was all about this remarkable display of solidarity with Israel. He said, "We have felt that rage after 9/11. We learned from mistakes that were made after 9/11. I believe his quote was, "While you feel that rage, don't be consumed about it, and make sure that you have clarity about your objectives." That is obviously urging Israel's leaders to think very strategically and very clearly about what comes next. Everybody has been waiting for quite some time now for this much anticipated ground invasion. There are very real questions, I think, being asked by world leaders from many different countries about what that looks like, what the tangible result would be of that. The Israelis have said they want to essentially dismantle and uproot Hamas once and for all, but still questions remain. How do you go about doing that? Who steps in to fill the void afterwards? We have heard previously President Biden say in an interview on 60 Minutes that he does not think it would be a good idea for Israel to try to reoccupy Gaza. And so I think just a subtle warning that now is also a time to take a deep breath and think very, very clearly about what the next moves might be and what the ramifications of those might be. And also a very stern warning, presumably to Iran, to Hezbollah, to others in the region who might be watching this moment. He said, who might be thinking of attacking Israel. He said, quote, don't, Sarah.
Yeah, some incredibly salient points from you there, Clarissa Ward in Ashkelon, Caitlin Collins here in Tel Aviv, and David Chalian in Washington. Thank you to you all. Coming up, we're going to go through some of that evidence that Israel says shows that they are not responsible for the attack. We will have much more on what is happening there in Gaza and here as we are in war. We'll be right back.
Dry skin is sensitive skin too, and it's natural. Treat it that way. Aveeno Daily Moisture with prebiotic oat is proven to moisturize dry skin all day.
Oh.
You'll love our formula for face too. Aveeno.
Oh.
The day you get your Clear Choice dental implants makes every day a let's dig in day. A chow down day. A take a big bite day. A perfectly delicious day. A love my new teeth day. Because your Clear Choice day is the day everything is back on the menu. A Clear Choice day changes every day. Schedule a free consultation.
Now's the time for cleaner indoor air with an air duct cleaning from Stanley Steamer. You've known us for carpet cleaning, but we've been cleaning air ducts for over 20 years. We do things the right way, cleaning your entire system. So if you need an air duct cleaning, call 1-800-STEAMER today.
Actually, you don't need vision to do most things in life. If I can see it and understand it quickly, anyone can. That's how I help people thrive. People who know media.
President Biden's speech to Israelis diplomatically threaded the needle skillfully. I saw my Paul Beckman, Paul Rainbow song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, created October 18th, 2023. Okay, here we go. Well, hey, President Biden's speech threaded the needle diplomatically, skillfully. Yes, his speech to Israelis while he was there during time of war, the first president to do so, threaded the needle diplomatically, skillfully said, we're behind you, we're gonna back you, we're not gonna go away, we're gonna support you, we'll be by your side. Oh yeah, oh yeah. He threaded that needle by saying, even though this was your 9/11 times 9, so to speak. Well, even though you may be full of rage because of October 7th and what Hamas did to all your people, atrocity after atrocity, keep your mind, keep your calm, even though you're gonna be full of revenge, and we know how come. Keep a cool head, make sure your decisions are not wrong, but are on the right path. It's easy to make mistakes, but for goodness sake, you gotta try to make the right decisions, and with a cool head, and then you'll be on the path to peace, while you do what you gotta do. Whoa, President Biden, you made an excellent speech. Could have done better myself. An excellent speech. And you said, yeah, you got some things done. Humanitarian aid is gonna flow again. Yeah, Israel has agreed and to work with Egypt to let humanitarian aid begin. No exact date yet, but it's gonna be in the process. As long as Hamas doesn't steal it away or try to dismantle the effort. But if it did that, then it would show what it's all about, which people have been trying to show it doesn't care anything about. The Palestinians they're supposed to be caring about or governing. Yeah, Israel and Egypt are gonna try to let humanitarian aid flow. Don't disturb the process, Hamas, or any other group there, terrorist group there in the Gaza Strip. You got that? You got that? Well, heed that warning. Whoa, ho, 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 ho. Ooh.